The crimson dust of Kepler 442b swirled around David's boots as he adjusted his environmental scanner, the twin suns casting harsh shadows across the rocky terrain. 3 months into the geological survey mission, he had grown accustomed to the planet's unforgiving landscape, but the wildlife still fascinated him. Emma's voice crackled through his comm unit from the orbital station. "David, I'm picking up some unusual seismic activity 2 clicks northeast of your position. Could be volcanic, but the patterns are strange." David squinted toward the coordinates, noting the jagged ridge that cut across the horizon like a broken spine. "Strange how?" "Rhythmic. Almost like footsteps, but massive ones. Whatever's causing it weighs at least 10 tons. The comment sent a chill down David's spine. The indigenous life forms they'd cataloged so far were mostly small insectoid creatures and hardy plant analogs. Nothing approaching that size had been documented. As he trekked toward the anomaly, following what appeared to be an ancient migration path worn smooth by countless generations, David's thoughts drifted to Earth. The Terran Colonial Authority had deemed this world suitable for terraforming, but David wondered if humanity had the right to reshape entire planets. The philosophical debate was interrupted by a sound that made his blood run cold, a low, mournful howl that seemed to vibrate through his bones. Cresting a small hill, David froze. Below him stretched a natural amphitheater, where the migration path wound between towering rock formations. And there, scattered across the ancient route, lay dozens of creatures unlike anything in their xenobiology databases. They were magnificent, quadrupedal beings roughly the size of earth bears but with elongated limbs and thick silver-blue fur that seemed to shimmer in the alien sunlight. Their faces held an unmistakable intelligence with large, expressive eyes and delicate, almost hand-like paws. A pack of them moved slowly along the trail, adults flanking smaller individuals in a protective formation. But something was wrong. The pack moved with obvious distress, pausing frequently as the adults nuzzled and encouraged the younger ones. David activated his translation software, hoping to decipher any vocalizations when he spotted the source of their anguish. A cub, no larger than a small dog, had collapsed on the worn stone path. Its breathing came in ragged gasps and its small body trembled with exhaustion. The pack had formed a circle around it, their mournful calls echoing off the canyon walls. The largest of the creatures, presumably the alpha, stood directly over the fallen cub, its massive frame radiating protective fury and desperate sorrow. "Emma, are you getting this?" David whispered, activating his visual feed. "My God," came Emma's breathless reply. "David, look at the behavioral patterns. They're not leaving the cub behind. This could be a funeral rite, or they're all going to die trying to save one member of their pack." David finished grimly. He could see the exhaustion in the other cubs, the way the adults constantly looked toward the horizon where storm clouds were gathering. The migration window was closing, and the approaching weather system could prove fatal to creatures caught in the open. The alpha raised its head and looked directly at David. For a moment that stretched into eternity, human and alien regarded each other across the ancient path. The creature's eyes held depths of intelligence and emotion that struck David like a physical blow. This was no mere animal. This was a person trapped in an impossible choice between individual and community survival. David made his decision. Slowly, hands raised in what he hoped was a universal gesture of peace, David approached the pack. The adults tensed, but the alpha held its ground, watching intently as David knelt beside the collapsed cub. The small creature's eyes fluttered open, fixing on David's face with surprising clarity. "Easy there, little one," David murmured, gently sliding his arms beneath the cub's trembling form. The fur was incredibly soft, and he could feel the rapid flutter of a small heart against his chest. "Emma, start monitoring my vitals. I'm about to find out if these folks understand interspecies cooperation." David stood carefully, cradling the exhausted cub against his environmental suit. The pack watched in silence as he took a step toward the migration route's continuation, then another. The alpha moved alongside him, its massive head turned toward David with an expression that seemed almost like gratitude. What followed was the most extraordinary journey of David's life. For 6 hours he walked beside beings that could have torn him apart with a casual swipe, carrying their most vulnerable member while storm winds howled around them. The pack moved with renewed purpose, the adults taking turns to brush against David's legs in what he interpreted as gestures of support and encouragement. Emma monitored from orbit, her voice a constant source of strength as David's suit systems compensated for the increasingly harsh conditions. "Vital signs are holding steady," she reported. "The cub's breathing has stabilized. David, whatever you're doing, it's working." As the twin suns began to set, casting the landscape in shades of purple and gold, the pack reached their destination, a series of caves carved into the canyon walls. Clearly a seasonal shelter that had been used for generations. The Alpha led David to the largest cave entrance, then stepped aside with unmistakable ceremony. David gently placed the cub on the soft sand inside the cave, watching as the small creature immediately curled up against its parent. The Alpha approached David one final time, pressing its massive head against his chest in what could only be described as an embrace. "Emma," David said softly, watching as the pack settled into their shelter, "I think we need to revise our terraforming recommendations for this world." "Already on it," Emma replied, her voice thick with emotion. "A planet where beings risk everything for a single individual is exactly the kind of place that deserves to remain unchanged." As David began his trek back to the survey station, the Alpha's call echoed across the canyon, not mournful this time, but triumphant. It was a sound that spoke of survival, cooperation, and the universal truth that sometimes the measure of intelligence isn't in what a species can build or conquer, but in what they're willing to carry when the path becomes too difficult to walk alone. The stars emerged overhead and David smiled. Humanity had just learned something invaluable about strength. Sometimes it meant knowing when to lift others up, rather than pushing forward alone. And perhaps, just perhaps, that lesson would make them worthy of the vast cosmos they were only beginning to explore.